Let's talk about a rare type of person. The kind of person who feels deeply, sees right through people, and doesn't get easily manipulated. I call them the super empath. And if you've ever been tangled up with an emotionally avoidant partner, the super empath is the one person they simply cannot control. Why? Because while a regular empath absorbs pain, a super empath notices it, processes it, and then responds with boundaries. They love deeply, but they don't abandon themselves to do it. Now, emotional avoidants, they're charming, mysterious, emotionally hot and cold. At first, they hook you with glimpses of vulnerability, then retreat the moment connection gets too real. They don't want to feel controlled, but ironically, they end up controlling the entire dynamic. How close you can get, when you get it, and how much of them you get to see. But here's the kicker. The super empath doesn't chase. They recognize the emotional breadcrumb trail and say, no thanks, I want the full meal. They'll ask the tough questions. Are you emotionally available? Are you ready for the kind of relationship I want? And they won't stay for vague answers. See, the avoidance usual tactics, ghosting, inconsistency, pushing you away to pull you back, don't work here. The super empath doesn't take distance personally. They take it as data, and they don't explode. They exit. They don't argue. They observe. They don't need to win. They just need to feel respected. What makes the super empath so powerful isn't their ability to feel others. It's their commitment to feeling themselves fully. They can love someone and still walk away when their needs aren't being met. That is not weakness, that is mastery. So if you're someone who feels everything, don't water that down. Refine it. Be the person who can love with open arms and walk away with an open heart. You are not hard to love. You are hard to manipulate. And that's exactly what makes you unforgettable. A super empath is someone who feels everything deeply, intuitively, and often before anyone else in the room even realizes what's going on. But what separates a regular empath from a super empath is what they do with that information. A regular empath might get lost in someone else's emotions, overwhelmed by the need to fix, heal, or save. But a super empath, they've learned that their emotional radar isn't a license to sacrifice themselves. They don't confuse love with self-abandonment. They show up with heart, absolutely, but they also show up with self. And they know their needs, their values, their standards, and they don't put those on the shelf just to keep someone else comfortable, especially someone who's emotionally unavailable. Avoidant partners tend to operate in this push-pull cycle. They pull you in just enough to keep you close, then push you away the moment you want something deeper. With most people, this dynamic works. The average person gets caught in the confusion. Did I do something wrong? Did I come on too strong? But the super empath doesn't fall for that. They don't internalize another person's emotional unavailability as a reflection of their own worth. They see the distance, the inconsistency, the reluctance to connect, and they recognize it for what it is: fear, avoidance, emotional unavailability. And they don't try to fix it. They don't make excuses. They hold space, sure, but they also hold standards. What throws avoidance off about a super empath is the fact that they feel so much and still walk away. It's disarming. Because the avoidant is used to either overpowering people emotionally or keeping them stuck in the guessing game. But the super empath doesn't chase the breadcrumb trail. They don't need to collect more data to prove what they already feel. If something's not right, they don't beg for it to be different. They take the message seriously and move forward. It's not that they don't hurt. They do. They just refuse to hurt themselves on repeat. That's the core of it. A super empath doesn't abandon themselves in the name of love. They don't shrink, suppress, or twist themselves to fit inside someone else's emotional limitations. They are willing to love deeply and let go fully. That blend of sensitivity and strength is what makes them so rare, and why, when it comes to emotional control, An avoidant simply has no power over them. Avoidant partners are often subtle in how they control a relationship. They don't do it through dominance or loud demands. Instead, they do it by withholding. They stay just emotionally distant enough to keep you questioning, doubting, reaching. One day they're warm, charming, and engaged. The next, they've pulled away, become unavailable, or shut down. This kind of inconsistency creates emotional confusion, and for many people, that confusion turns into obsession, trying to win them back, trying to figure them out, trying to be enough to make them open up. The trick is, the avoidant doesn't look like they're in control. They often act like they just need space or are scared to be vulnerable. But that narrative often keeps the other person stuck, constantly making room, constantly trying to prove that they're safe to love. Meanwhile, the avoidant dictates the pace of the relationship, the depth of the conversations, and the level of intimacy. They decide when they're available and when they're not. They leave texts on read, cancel plans, give just enough reassurance to stop you from walking away, but not enough to make you feel secure. That is control, just wearing the mask of detachment. This strategy works really well on people who base their value on being chosen. People who mistake emotional unavailability for mystery or depth. People who take responsibility for someone else's silence. But when an avoidant meets a super empath, that whole system starts to break down. The super empath doesn't dance around uncertainty. They don't fill in the gaps with fantasy. They want emotional presence, not emotional riddles. When they see inconsistency, they call it out, not with drama, but with clarity. They might say, "I sense you're not emotionally available right now. I'm looking for something deeper. Let me know if and when you are." That calm, confident boundary shatters the avoidant's control. What the avoidant counts on is the other person being afraid of losing them. But the super empath isn't afraid of loss if it means preserving their peace. They don't engage in emotional tug of war. They don't try to decode mixed signals. Instead, they step out of the power struggle entirely. And that, in itself, is the moment the avoidant can't use inconsistency to keep someone attached is the moment they realize they're no longer steering the emotional ship. The super empath simply won't stay in a dynamic that feels one-sided, no matter how strong the chemistry is. Super empaths don't waste time pretending not to know what they know. When something feels off, they don't push it down or cover it with hope. They ask questions, clear, direct, grounded questions. Not to interrogate, but to understand. What are you looking for right now? Are you emotionally available? Do you actually want something real, or are you just passing time? These aren't threats, they're filters. And if someone avoids the answers, that alone is the answer. Avoidant people don't usually like being asked clear questions. They thrive in ambiguity because it allows them to keep their distance without ever fully walking away. They might flirt with the idea of closeness, say all the right things when they feel safe, then pull back the second someone gets too close to their truth. But with a super empath, that emotional smokescreen doesn't work. The moment things start to get blurry or inconsistent, the super empath holds up a mirror. What throws the avoidant off is the fact that the super empath doesn't demand connection. They require it. There's a big difference. Demanding comes from insecurity. Requiring comes from self-worth. That's the energy the super empath brings to every interaction. They're not begging someone to show up emotionally. They're observing whether that person can show up at all. If the answer is no, they don't make it mean they're not enough. They simply move on with clarity. This makes the usual avoidant patterns ineffective. Things like mixed messages, vague promises, disappearing acts, they all fall flat. Why? Because the super empath doesn't chase. They don't spend time interpreting silence or guessing what someone means through their behavior. They believe words should match actions. If they don't, they ask. If the answer is unclear or the energy becomes inconsistent, they stop investing. It's not about being cold or cynical. It's about valuing their own emotional bandwidth. The super empath knows their time and heart are precious. They know that love without clarity is just a trap dressed up as potential. So they use questions not to push someone away, but to protect their peace. They're not afraid of difficult conversations. They're afraid of wasting their emotional energy on someone who keeps dodging intimacy. When you operate from that place of calm, centered self-awareness, people either rise to meet you or fall out of your life. The avoidant can't hold power over someone who sees them clearly and refuses to chase their shadow. A super empath doesn't explode when they're hurt. They don't scream, beg, or throw ultimatums. They do something far more powerful. They observe, they sit with the feeling, they process what's happening, and then they make a decision that protects their emotional well-being. When someone pulls away, goes silent, or starts playing mind games, the super empath doesn't react with chaos, they respond with clarity. That alone changes the entire dynamic. Avoidant people often rely on emotional reactions to reinforce their control. When they withdraw affection or become distant, they expect their partner to panic, to chase, to try harder. That reaction gives them confirmation that they're wanted, needed, even worshipped, without having to risk real intimacy. It's a cycle. They create emotional instability, watch the other person scramble to repair the connection, and then pull away again the moment it feels too close. It's not always conscious, but it's how they maintain power. But when a super empath is faced with that kind of emotional instability, they don't participate. They don't try to pull the other person back. They recognize what's happening for what it is, a defense mechanism. And instead of getting pulled into it, they take a step back, not out of punishment, but out of self-respect. They understand that someone else's inconsistency isn't a reflection of their worth. It's just a sign that the other person may not be ready or capable of real emotional connection. That kind of response is deeply unsettling to someone who's used to controlling others through emotional push-pull. Because when the super empath doesn't react, the avoidant loses their grip. Suddenly, their usual tactics don't work. The silence isn't met with desperation. The mixed signals aren't decoded or chased. Instead, they're met with stillness, reflection, and eventually, distance. The super empath understands that not every wound needs to be screamed about. Some just need to be acknowledged internally and acted on wisely. They won't beg someone to stay or change. They'll just remove themselves when they realize the environment isn't healthy. That quiet decision carries more weight than any emotional outburst ever could. What makes it so impactful is the emotional self-control it takes, the ability to feel everything, to love, to hope, to hurt, and still choose peace over chaos. That's strength. Not pretending not to care, but caring deeply while choosing not to betray yourself for it. And that's something the avoidant has no defense against. Emotional intelligence is often praised for how well someone can read a room, understand others, and show empathy. But emotional intelligence without self-worth can become a trap. You end up understanding people so well that you excuse behavior that hurts you. That's where the super empath rises above the rest. They combine emotional intelligence with solid self-worth, creating a kind of quiet power that can't be manipulated. It's not just that they feel deeply, it's that they know their value while feeling deeply. That balance is what makes them unshakable. The super empath doesn't just see where someone is emotionally, they see whether that person is willing to grow. And if they're not, they don't make it a project. They don't believe love means trying to heal or fix someone who isn't choosing to do the work themselves. They love with open arms, but they keep their standards intact. They can listen to someone's pain, empathize with their fears, and still walk away if those fears are used as an excuse to avoid showing up. People with avoidant tendencies often confuse emotional depth with control. They think if someone really gets them, that person will stay no matter how many times they pull away. But the super empath's self-worth doesn't allow that. They don't chase connection that costs them peace. They don't stay where they're emotionally starved just because they understand why someone is withholding. Understanding doesn't equal accepting. Compassion doesn't equal compliance. That's the game changer. The super empath isn't seeking validation through another person's love. They already know they're lovable. They already feel whole. So when someone comes along offering only fragments of affection, they don't accept it just to feel wanted. They hold out for something real, and if it doesn't come, they don't try to force it. They let go. This combination of deep emotional awareness and inner strength is rare. It's what makes the super empath such a powerful presence. They don't need to control anyone, and they can't be controlled. Their calm, centered approach exposes the emotional games for what they are. While others get caught in the cycle of highs and lows, the super empath steps out entirely. They don't need drama to feel alive. They need consistency, honesty, and connection. And if they don't find it, they move on. Not out of bitterness, but out of alignment with who they know they are. That is emotional intelligence, elevated. That is self-worth in motion. And that is why the avoidant loses their influence the moment a super empath refuses to play along. So here's the truth. Being a super empath isn't about being soft, weak, or overly sensitive. It's about being awake. Awake to your feelings, awake to other people's energy, and most importantly, awake to your own value. That awareness is your shield. It's what keeps you from falling for emotional breadcrumbs. It's what allows you to walk away with your head high even when your heart is heavy. Avoidant partners thrive on the belief that you'll keep trying, keep chasing, keep proving. But a super empath flips the script. They don't need to prove anything. They just know. Know when someone is emotionally closed off. Know when a pattern is forming. Know when to stay and when to leave. That kind of wisdom isn't loud. It's still. But it's powerful enough to shake the foundation of anyone who tries to control through confusion. So if you're someone who feels deeply, who sees through people, who senses when something isn't right even before words are spoken, don't see that as a weakness. Don't shrink from it. Own it, sharpen it, and pair it with strong boundaries, high standards, and a non-negotiable belief in your own worth. That's not just emotional intelligence. That's emotional power. Because in a world full of half-present connections and emotionally unavailable dynamics, the super empath is the one person who can't be played, can't be led in circles, and definitely can't be controlled. Thank you so much for being here today, for showing up not just to listen, but to grow. Whether you're already living as a super empath or just stepping into that power, remember, you're not too much. You're not too emotional. You're just the right amount of awake. And that makes you unstoppable. Take care of your heart, protect your peace, and don't ever dim your light to fit inside someone else's shadow. Thank you and goodbye.